I was standing in line at the bank on a Thursday morning, thinking it would be another routine errand when everything changed forever. My mother had been saving in that account for decades. Every extra shift at work, every coupon clipped, every small sacrifice she made went into that savings. She had always told me it was her safety net for retirement and for emergencies, and I never questioned it. We walked up to the counter, and my mother handed her card and identification to the teller. She smiled politely and said she wanted to withdraw $20,000 to cover some home repairs and medical expenses. The teller tapped on the keyboard, and her smile faded. She excused herself and went into the back. My mother and I exchanged a glance. After a few minutes, the branch manager appeared. He was a tall man with a shiny suit and a smug expression that made my stomach turn. He asked my mother to step into his office. We followed him in, and he closed the door behind us. He sat across the desk and folded his hands. "I am sorry, but it appears your account has been frozen due to suspicious activity," he said in a flat tone. My mother frowned. Suspicious activity? What kind of activity? The manager tilted his head like he was speaking to a child. "Large transfers flagged by our compliance department. We have reason to believe your account has been compromised." My mother's voice was calm but firm. "Then show me the transfers. Show me the records." The manager's eyes flickered, and he turned his computer screen slightly, but not enough for us to see. "I cannot provide that information at this time. You will need to submit a formal request." My temper rose. "This is her money. You cannot just lock it away without explanation." He looked at me with disdain. "Sir, calm down. These are regulatory matters. We must protect the bank's integrity." I almost laughed at the word integrity coming from his mouth. My mother leaned forward. "How much money's left in my account?" He tapped a few keys and smirked. "At present, balance $0. I froze. My mother blinked once and then sat back in her chair. She looked at him for a long moment while he adjusted his tie. "Where did it go?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "Fees, withdrawals, flagged transactions. Our hands are tied." My mother straightened. "You expect me to believe that years of my savings vanished overnight into fees?" He leaned back and clasped his hands behind his head. "Ma'am, the bank reserves the right to adjust accounts when irregularities are found. This protects all our customers." I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. He was lying. He was enjoying it. I wanted to leap across the desk and shake the truth out of him. My mother simply stood. "Thank you for your time." The manager raised his eyebrows, surprised she did not argue further. As we walked out of his office, I whispered angrily, "Mom, we cannot let them get away with this." She said nothing until we reached the car. She sat behind the wheel, her face unreadable. Then she spoke quietly. "They just made a very big mistake." I had never heard her voice sound like that before. Cold, steady, certain. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but she started the car and pulled away from the bank without a word. The drive home was silent. I kept replaying the moment in my head. Zero balance? Suspicious transfers? Fees? It did not make sense. My mother had always been meticulous with her finances. She wrote down every expense in her little notebook and kept every receipt. There was no way she had made large transfers without telling me. I tried to convince myself this was a simple error, but the look on the manager's face told me otherwise. He knew something. He was hiding something. When we reached the house, she finally spoke. "Go make us some tea." I did as she asked, though my hand shook. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, she was already at the dining table with her notebook open. Years of transactions filled the pages in neat handwriting. She flipped to the most recent entries. The last balance she had written was nearly $240,000, her life's savings. She tapped the page with her finger. "This is what should be in that account, not zero." She opened another folder filled with bank statements, each one carefully organized by year. She pointed to the last official statement from 3 weeks ago. Same balance, no suspicious transfers, no sudden withdrawals, everything consistent. She looked at me, and for the first time I noticed the fire in her eyes. The bank did not lose my money by mistake. They stole it. I swallowed hard. How do we fight them? They have lawyers, money, influence? She sipped her tea slowly. "You leave that to me." I knew my mother as a kind and hard-working woman who never complained despite carrying burdens that would have crushed others. I never knew she carried another side, a side that was now stirring awake. She closed her notebook firmly. "I will need to dig through some old files in the attic. There are things you have not seen." I nodded, uncertain what she meant, but I could feel the shift in the air. The bank thought they could intimidate her. They thought she was just another powerless customer. They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake, hearing every creak of the house, wondering how something so secure could be stolen so easily. My mother moved quietly in the attic above me, boxes opening, papers rustling. I wanted to ask her what she was looking for, but something told me not to interrupt. In the morning, she came down carrying a locked briefcase I had never seen before. She placed it on the table and looked at me. "We are going to need more than bank statements to win this fight." Her voice was steady. I stared at the briefcase, then at her. "Mom, what is going on?" She gave me a small, tired smile. "You will find out soon enough. For now, all you need to know is that they picked the wrong person to steal from." I realized then that this was only the beginning. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee drifting through the house and the sound of my mother moving about with unusual purpose. She sat at the kitchen table with that old locked briefcase in front of her, the same one she had carried down from the attic the night before. Papers were spread across the table in neat stacks, and she was making notes in her careful handwriting. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. I sat down across from her, still trying to wrap my head around what had happened at the bank the day before. I expected her to look tired, defeated even, broken, after hearing her life savings had vanished overnight. Instead, she looked like someone preparing for a battle she had been anticipating for years. She closed the briefcase and pushed her notebook toward me. "This is everything I ever earned," she said, tapping the numbers. "Every paycheck, every tax refund, every side job. I kept track because I knew someday someone would try to take it." I frowned. "You mean you expected this?" She sipped her coffee before answering. "Not exactly this, but banks have been playing games with people like me my whole life. They think they can bury you in paperwork and make you feel small. They count on you giving up." She leaned forward and lowered her voice. "That is why I never counted only on them." I opened the notebook and flipped through. She had records going back decades, handwritten pages cross-referenced with official statements, every deposit, every withdrawal, every penny. My chest tightened as I realized how much discipline and sacrifice it had taken for her to accumulate that savings. She never bought new clothes for herself. She packed lunches instead of eating out. She worked extra shifts and tucked the money away quietly. That account was more than numbers. It was her proof of a lifetime struggle. I clenched my fists. They cannot just erase that. We have to sue them. She shook her head. They would drown us in court fees and motions. No, we need something stronger, something they cannot twist. She stood and walked to the hall closet. From a box on the top shelf, she pulled a stack of faded envelopes and spread them on the table. Inside were letters from the bank over the years, notices of policy changes, offers for loans, explanations of new fees. She pointed at one from 5 years ago. "See this," she said. "They introduced a maintenance fee, but I had in writing that my account was exempt. Yet if you look closely at their statements, you will see they began applying that fee anyway. $10 a month for 60 months. That is $600 right there, stolen in plain sight." I flipped through more statements and saw she was right. Small amounts missing month after month. It was like they had been testing how much they could take without anyone noticing. She nodded at my expression. "And that is just the beginning. I kept every letter, every notice, every change. They cannot hide what they did." She opened the briefcase then, and for the first time, I saw what was inside. There were official-looking documents, stamped and signed, reports with government letterheads, and binders full of printed case files. "Mom, what is this?" She looked at me evenly. "My old life. Before you were born, I worked in federal service, financial crimes division. I chased people who thought they were too clever to be caught. Some wore ski masks, others wore suits. The ones in suits were always harder to catch." I stared at her, stunned. "You mean you were an agent?" She smiled faintly. Retired now, but I still know how this game is played. She closed the briefcase again and snapped it shut. We are not just going to fight them. We are going to expose them. The weight of her words settled over me. All at once, the pieces made sense. Her meticulous records, her calm response at the bank, her lack of panic. She had been preparing for this kind of battle her entire life. She stood and stretched. First thing we do is document everything, every missing dollar, every violation, every contradiction. Then we find out who inside that bank signed off on the theft. She looked out the window where the morning sun was breaking through the clouds. And when we do, we will make sure they regret ever touching my savings. I nodded, though my stomach churned with nervous energy. This was bigger than I had realized. My mother was not just another victim. She was about to become their worst nightmare. That afternoon, we returned to the branch, but not as customers seeking help. We went in as investigators. My mother walked straight past the line of people waiting for tellers and into the lobby, where the branch manager's office sat like a glass box. He was inside speaking on the phone. When he saw us, his smile vanished. My mother knocked once and opened the door without waiting for permission. "We need copies of all account activity for the past 6 months," she said firmly. The manager frowned. "I already told you, ma'am, your account is under review. Those documents are not available." My mother held his gaze. "Then give me the compliance officer's name and direct number." He blinked, clearly not used to being challenged. "I cannot disclose internal contacts." "Then I will subpoena them," she said flatly. I sat stunned watching my mother dismantle his rehearsed excuses like they were made of paper. The manager's face reddened. "Ma'am, if you continue this behavior, I will have to ask you to leave." My mother leaned forward, resting her hands on his desk. "You took my money. I will get it back. The only question is whether you go down with it." For the first time, his composure cracked. He stammered about procedure and regulations, but she cut him off. "Thank you for your time." She stood and walked out, leaving him speechless. I hurried after her. "Mom, are you trying to get us arrested?" She smiled calmly. "No, I am letting him know he is not in control anymore." Back home, she set up her laptop and began cross-checking every statement against her handwritten records. She showed me columns of numbers. "Look here," she said, pointing to a cluster of transactions. "These withdrawals were supposedly made at ATMs in another state. I was working double shifts that week, right here in town. Impossible." She clicked through more records. "And here, look, same day, transactions posted in 2 different cities, miles apart." She leaned back. Classic layering tactic. Someone is moving money around to make it look legitimate. My head spun. "Are you saying this is fraud?" She nodded. "Not sloppy mistakes. Coordinated theft. Probably bigger than just my account." She opened her folder on her laptop, and I saw scanned documents from old investigations, flowcharts of money movement, names of shell companies, patterns of deception. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Banks rely on trust. They think no one will bother chasing small inconsistencies. But if you map them all together, you see the scheme." That night, she called an old colleague whose number she still had memorized, a retired forensic accountant. She explained the situation in clipped professional language. I could only hear one side of the conversation, but from her tone, I knew he understood. She thanked him and hung up. "He will run some numbers for us," she said. "He still has access to databases we will need." I stared at her. "Mom, how deep does this go?" She met my eyes. "Deeper than they want anyone to know." The next morning, we drove to the county courthouse. She filed an official request for transaction records under consumer protection statutes. The clerk behind the glass looked nervous when he saw the forms. Most people never knew they could even request such things. As we walked back to the car, she exhaled slowly. This is the part they never expect. Ordinary people fighting back with the law instead of walking away in silence. I realized then how dangerous this was becoming. If my mother was right, someone inside that bank was orchestrating fraud. They would not want her exposing it. I asked her if she was scared. She looked at me calmly. "Of them? No. I know their playbook. What scares me
is how many lives they might have already destroyed while hiding behind that logo. She started the car, and I knew in that moment we were not just chasing back her savings, we were stepping into a war.
That evening, the war started to show its teeth. We had just finished dinner when headlights swept across the living room wall. A sleek black sedan idled outside our driveway. Two men in dark suits stepped out and walked toward the porch, carrying clipboards. My stomach tightened, but my mother remained composed. She opened the door before they could knock. "Can I help you?" she asked. One of the men held out an envelope. "Notice of investigation," he said curtly. "The bank is accusing you of attempting to defraud their institution with falsified records. You are to cease all claims immediately or face legal action." I snatched the envelope and tore it open. The letter inside was printed on official-looking stationery, filled with threats of lawsuits and demands for silence. I felt my chest burn with anger. "This is ridiculous. You are the ones who stole the money." The men did not flinch. "We are only delivering the message, sir." They turned and walked back to their car without another word. My mother watched them leave, her expression unreadable. She closed the door slowly. That was their first move. She sat back down at the table and opened her briefcase again. Inside were more documents. She spread them across the table, one by one. "I want you to understand something," she said softly. "They will try to intimidate us. They will block accounts, send letters, maybe even try to dig into our personal history. But we are not the first to face this." She pulled out copies of old case files. Banks fined for laundering cartel money, executives imprisoned for embezzlement, schemes exposed only after years of cover-ups. She tapped the files. They always think they are untouchable until someone shows them otherwise. I stared at her. "Mom, what are you planning?" She leaned forward. "We are going to build a case so strong they cannot bury it. Tomorrow we will request surveillance footage from the branch. Those ATM withdrawals happened when I was on camera somewhere else. That is evidence. We will gather statements from anyone who saw me working those shifts. More evidence. We will find others who lost money the same way. Pattern of abuse." My heart raced. "And then what?" She looked at me calmly. "Then we trigger the trap." The next day, she began making calls to neighbors and coworkers. One by one, people admitted small amounts missing from their accounts, fees that made no sense, transactions they never authorized. Most had complained once and been brushed off. Some had given up entirely. She wrote every name and every detail in her notebook. By the afternoon, she had a list of 14 people, all with similar stories. "This is bigger than just me," she said grimly. "They are stealing from everyone who will not fight back." That night, as I tried to sleep, I could hear her in the next room speaking quietly on the phone. She was calling another former colleague. From the tone of her voice, I realized she was not just documenting theft. She was preparing a full-scale investigation. The bank thought they were silencing one woman. Instead, they had awakened someone they should never have crossed.
2 days later, we walked back into that same branch, but this time, my mother carried her briefcase like it was a weapon. The lobby was busy with customers, but the noise seemed to fade when we headed straight for the manager's office. He looked up from his desk, his smug expression faltering for just a second before he forced a smile. "Back again?" he said, as if we were inconveniencing him. My mother closed the door behind us and set the briefcase on his desk. "I am here to give you one last chance," she said evenly. "Return my funds and issue a full accounting, or face consequences you are not prepared for." The manager laughed nervously. "Ma'am, you do not understand how banking works. Our records are final." My mother clicked open the case and slid several documents across his desk. "These are surveillance reports, showing I was at work during the so-called withdrawals." Here are affidavits from coworkers. Here are 14 statements from other customers who lost money the same way. His face paled as he flipped through the pages. He tried to speak, but she cut him off. And here, she added calmly, are my credentials. She placed a worn leather wallet on the table and flipped it open. The gold badge inside caught the light. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. Retired, but not powerless. His jaw dropped. He looked from the badge to her face and back again. "You cannot be serious," he whispered. She leaned closer, her eyes locked on his. "I spent 20 years putting people like you behind bars. I know every trick, every shell company, every way you try to cover your tracks. And I still have friends who take my calls." He tried to muster authority, but his voice cracked. "This is highly irregular." She smiled coldly. "So is stealing $250,000 from my account. Now here is what will happen." She pulled out another folder, thicker than the rest. A preliminary report, already shared with federal contacts. Evidence of falsified signatures, fraudulent transfers, and misuse of customer funds. If I walk out of this building without my money, this report becomes a full-scale investigation. The manager's hands trembled as he set the papers down. He opened his mouth, but no words came. My mother straightened and locked her briefcase. "You have 48 hours," she said quietly. "Return what is mine and make this right, or watch your entire branch collapse under the weight of your lies." She turned and walked out, leaving him frozen behind his desk. I followed her, heart pounding in my chest. Outside in the sunlight, I finally spoke. "Mom, you just showed him your badge." She nodded. It was time. I swallowed hard. "What if he calls your bluff?" She looked at me calmly. "Then we let the FBI finish what I started."
The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I kept expecting a phone call, some angry official pounding on our door, or maybe even police showing up with some fabricated charge to scare us off. My mother, on the other hand, moved with calm precision. She spent the first evening typing a detailed report on her laptop, attaching scanned statements, affidavits, and her own notes. She emailed copies to 2 trusted former colleagues, now high-ranking in the bureau. "If anything happens to me," she said quietly, "this file will not disappear." The following morning, the phone rang. It was the bank manager. His voice was strained, polite in a way that sounded forced. "Mrs. Carter, we are still reviewing your case. Please be patient." My mother listened without interrupting. When he finished, she simply said, "You have 24 hours left." Then she hung up. The rest of that day, we received strange calls from numbers we did not recognize. Some were hang-ups, others were vague threats. I heard one man whisper, "You should stop digging before it gets dangerous." My stomach twisted, but my mother never flinched. That evening, a black SUV sat idling across the street for hours, its tinted windows facing our house. I paced the living room, furious. "They're trying to scare us." My mother sipped her tea. Fear is their strongest tool. Do not give it to them. On the second morning, the knock finally came. When I opened the door, 3 men in suits stood on the porch. Behind them, 2 more waited near the SUV. The lead man introduced himself as a regional compliance officer, here to resolve the matter. My mother invited them inside and offered coffee as if they were neighbors dropping by. They declined and followed us to the dining room. He opened a leather folder. "After a thorough review of your case, we have determined there was an error in how your account was processed. Your funds will be restored immediately along with a small compensation for inconvenience." He pushed a paper across the table. I reached for it, but my mother held up her hand. She scanned it silently, then she shook her head. "No." The man frowned. "I beg your pardon?" She tapped the document. "This is a settlement agreement. You want me to sign away my right to pursue further action in exchange for a fraction of what you stole? That will not happen." His smile thinned. "Mrs. Carter, we are trying to be reasonable." My mother leaned forward, her eyes hard as stone. "So am I. You will restore every dollar. You will provide full documentation of every fraudulent transfer, and you will do it before my colleagues arrive from Washington." The room went silent. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. The lead officer tried to hold her gaze but failed. Finally, he gathered his papers and stood. "We will be in touch." They left without another word. Through the window, I watched their SUV pull away quickly. My chest was tight with fear, but also pride. "Mom, what if they never give it back?" She closed her briefcase calmly. "Then we take down the entire bank."